Welcome back to Donzi's World. As always, I am your host. My name is Donzi. Now today, I've got the most wonderfulest show. You remember in the last episode, I told you that the peeper frogs were about to come out of the ground? Well, guess what? It happened. The peeper frogs are up right now and they're screaming their heads off. And I'm going to show that to you a little bit later on in the show. But now, before we get into that, I want to do something else for you. You know, I've been getting a couple emails from people telling me what I should talk about on Donzi's World. And there's a couple kids who go to Connecticut College, and they emailed me. They wanted my ideas on UFOs. They wanted to know if I believed in UFOs. So I'm going to talk about that. Also, a friend of mine wanted to know about the gargoyles that are up on the buildings all around Yale University. If you go around Yale, you'll see these little figurines stuck to the buildings all around Yale. Well, I'm going to talk about it, and I'm going to show you some of those gargoyles. So we're going to look at that. At the end of the show, we're going to see the peeper frogs. It's going to be wonderful. Stick around. You're going to enjoy yourself. All right, well, now I want to get into the first topic of this episode, which is going to be a response to the email that I received from the students over at Connecticut College. They asked me if I believed in UFOs, and they wanted to know my thoughts on the UFO subject. And I'll tell you right off the bat, I'm not a scientist, and these are just my opinions, my personal opinions. I myself do not believe in UFOs. I do not believe that any other intelligent life from somewhere out there has visited Earth at any time in history. I just don't believe it. Now, in the very first episode of Donzi's World, I dealt with the issue of the Loch Ness Monster, which is a mythical creature that's supposed to live in a lake in Scotland. And I laid out my ideas of why I thought that that was not true. And now I'm going to lay out my ideas of why I think the UFO story is not true. See, I don't believe in any of this stuff. The Loch Ness Monster, Bigfoot, or Yeti, whatever you want to call them, UFOs and ghosts. I don't believe in any of that stuff. I don't believe there are ghosts, and I don't believe there are UFOs. Now, I could tell you that the person who influenced my thinking on this subject the most was a great man by the name of Carl Sagan. He's passed away now, but he used to have a terrific show called Cosmos, where he talked about all kinds of things having to do with the Earth and about space and about the universe. Now, Mr. Sagan pointed out that the universe is so large that it would be improbable for another civilization traveling the universe to just happen to stumble upon our society. The universe is just too big for that. And the only way for another intelligent civilization to know for sure that we were here living and breathing on the planet Earth is to receive some kind of radio communication from us. But here's the trick right here. You see, the closest possible civilization to us on Earth right now is about 200 light years away from us. Now, scientists made this calculation by looking at the stars surrounding us, figuring out which ones had planets, and figuring out which of those planets could sustain intelligent life. And they came up with the conclusion that the closest possible choice for another intelligent civilization was 200 light years from us. Now, that means that any radio communication leaving the planet Earth would take 200 years traveling at the speed of light to reach that other intelligent civilization. So there is no way in the world that our radio signals emanating from Earth and going out into the universe could have reached another intelligent civilization by now. If there are intelligent people out there, which I believe that there are, they have not heard our radio signals yet. So that means that the only way that another civilization could have found us on Earth was just by traveling around, roaming the universe, and somehow stumbling across our planet by accident. And I really don't think that happened. You know, there are people who say that they saw UFOs, There are people who say that they were abducted by aliens. But as you know, there are all kinds of crazy people in the world. Michael Jackson's not the only one. So that's basically my point of view about UFOs and space aliens. Just like Bigfoot, Loch Ness Monster, and ghosts, I don't believe in any of it. There's a rational explanation for everything. It doesn't have to be some big fantastic story. Everything in the world has a basic, simple answer. But the human mind is so powerful, we like to invent these big, imaginative, fantastic stories, and we do. I tend to look at things a little more realistically. Now I'd like to talk about a subject that a good friend of mine asked me to talk about, and it's the subject of gargoyles. As you know, gargoyles are these little creatures, these little stone figurines that are placed on buildings, and they're fun to look at. But I had to go online to find out about their origin and about why they came about. And what I found was that there isn't just one story about gargoyles. There are different theories, and you could pick and choose which one you choose to believe. Nobody really knows for sure how gargoyles started. One theory is that they are used to ward off evil spirits. I guess if you have a scary gargoyle in your house, it'll scare away the evil things in the world. That's one theory. Now there's another theory that involves a whole story, and it has to do with a mythical dragon that supposedly lived near Paris, France long ago. And this dragon was terrorizing the town. Oh, it was burning up the buildings with its fiery breath and, just causing havoc all over the place. So the townspeople got mad, and they got the priests to go and kill the dragon, and that's what happened. The priests went, they slayed the dragon, and then the townspeople burned the dragon in a great fire. But guess what happened? Because the head of the dragon was immune to heat, because it's always spewing fire, I guess the head and the neck of the dragon couldn't be burned. When the townspeople set fire to this dragon, the head and the neck remained. So then they took the head and the neck of the dragon and nailed it up on a building. And supposedly that's one of the stories of how gargoyles started. When they nailed the head of the dragon up on a building, then they liked the idea and they started doing it more and more. And then even another theory about how gargoyles started. The gargoyles were little devils, and when these little devils were running away from the church, they were frozen into stone. So that's another theory of where the gargoyles come from. They're little devils that were frozen into stone by the purity of the church. Now, when I went to Yale University to tape the gargoyles up on the buildings, I found that the gargoyles over at Yale aren't really little scary creatures. They're not scary at all. They're just little whimsical characters, little figurines, actually. Some of them actually look like portraits. It looked like someone's face, a natural face, not a scary thing at all. So let's take a look at that now. Let's look at the gargoyles that are on the buildings on Yale University. And as we look at that, we're going to listen to some of the beautiful music from Michelle Schacht. Enjoy that.
Jump, Jim Crow, how do you walk so slow like a little red rooster with a one-trick leg? Look like you the one laying the egg. I don't know when, but it'll be real soon. Going down the road by the light of the moon. Going to the city to see a zip cone. Going to the city to see a zip cone. Slick, how do you do that walking trick? You got a woman on the left, a woman on the right. You all dressed up for saying how to shine. If I knew your secret, I would make it mine. If I knew your secret, I would make it mine. Tar baby, tell me true. Who is really the jigaboo? Is it the white man, the white, talking that jive, or the black man, the black, trying to stay alive? You can't touch the tar baby, everybody knows. Smiling on the wall with the bone in the nose. That's the way that the story goes. That's the way my story goes.
And now, as I promised you in the beginning of the show, I'm going to do a new segment called Donzi's Diaries. And these are going to be short little stories about my history and things that have happened to me in the past. Well, this story that I'm going to tell now is about the time that I got to fly an airplane. And when I tell this story, the first thing people say is, oh, did the pilot have a heart attack? Because, of course, when you see this scene on TV where someone like me gets to fly an airplane, it's always because there was some big crisis and you know, the pilot had a heart attack or something like that, and then one of the passengers had to fly the plane. But that's not what happened in this story. The way my story goes is that years ago, I used to go to Florida every winter, and then in the summertime, I'd come back around this area and work around here. And I used to work for the same group of people in both places. There was a couple rich guys that I knew, and they owned houses in Florida, and their summer houses were up around here. So wherever I was always working for these same people, whether I was down there or up here. Well, this one guy that I worked for had a little house in Newport, Rhode Island. He had bought the carriage house to this big mansion. And when I went there to do the work, there were still horse stables on the first floor. And what I had to do was rip out the horse stables and build a nice apartment for him and his girlfriend. Now, this guy was about 55 and he was ugly, but his girlfriend was about 25 and she was beautiful. So, of course, he gave her whatever she wanted. And what she really wanted was to go to pilot school and have her own airplane. So that's what this guy did for her. He put her through school, and when she graduated, he bought her a little four-seater airplane. Well, one day I was working on the apartment in the horse stables there, and this girl came to me and she says, Donnie, she says, I have to go pick up a guy in Cape Cod and fly him to Hartford, but I don't want to go by myself. She said, do you want to come with me? So of course I wasn't going to say no to that. I always love a good adventure. So I dropped my tool belt and off we went. We jumped in her Jeep and we went out to the Newport airport where her airplane was. And before we took off, she had to do a bunch of safety checks. She has to jump up on the top of the wings and check for water in the gasoline tank. And she has to check the flaps to see if the flaps are working, check the tire pressure, and a whole bunch of stuff you have to check before you take off in a plane like that. And this girl was very competent, very, very competent. So we took off in the plane, we flew to Cape Cod, we picked up the guy that we were supposed to, loaded him up, and we flew him out to Hartford and dropped him off at Bradley International. Now all we had to do was fly back to Newport and go back home again. So she had a special way that she did it. As you fly into Newport and also as you drive into Newport, there are two big suspension bridges leading into Newport. One is the Jamestown Bridge and the other is the Newport Bridge. And there are these big, huge suspension bridges. So what she does when she goes back home again, was she flies directly over the tops of these bridges, and they're in a straight line. And she knows that when she flies over these bridges in a straight line, directly over the top of them, she's on a straight line going into Newport, and that's how she got back home again. So when we were flying, she got herself all lined up, everything was going good, we're flying over the two bridges, and she asked me if I wanted to take over the controls. And of course I said yes. Now in a small little plane like that, there's a steering wheel on both sides so that either person sitting in the front could drive the plane. So all she had to do was flip a little switch and the controls went from her side to my side. Now I'm holding the wheel and I'm in control of the plane. And all she wanted me to do was to hold on to the wheel and keep the plane straight going over these bridges. But I didn't want to sit there just holding the wheel. I wanted to do something. And I knew if you pushed the wheel in a little bit, something would happen. So that's what I did. I pushed the wheel in, and the plane started going down a little bit, and then she flipped the switch, and the controls went back over to her side, and I was done flying. That was it, because I pushed the wheel. But I got to fly the plane for a little while. To me, that was a big adventure. So that's my story about how I got to fly an airplane. And maybe in a future episode of Donzi's World, I'll get back to this issue of Donzi's Diaries and tell you another fun little story from my background and my history. I hope you enjoyed that one. Well, here we are. I'm up on top of Sleeping Giant Mountain, and it's the bestest time of year. The peeper frogs just came out, and they're right behind me, croaking their heads off. Take a listen. Can you hear that sound behind me? Those are little frogs that just came up out of the ground, and now they're croaking their heads off, looking for a lover. I just love this time of year. I wait for it every year in the beginning of spring. I wait for the little peeper frogs to come out, then I run up to the top of Sleeping Giant just so I can listen to them. I think it's wonderful. This is great for me. I can see the little froggies swimming around in the water, and I can see them croaking their heads off, and I can hear them. It's hilarious. You know, I saw a TV show about frogs one time. You know what happens to them in the wintertime? In the winter, the frogs live in the ground, under the ground, all winter long. And you know what? They freeze up. When the ground freezes, the frogs freeze too. The frogs are like little ice cubes. But in the springtime, the frogs thaw out and their hearts start beating again. They come alive. And then they come up out of the ground like they did just now. And now they're all croaking their heads off. They're looking for a lover to mate. You know, if you listen to them, they sound like little birds chirping. But they're not birds, they're little frogs, they're little peeper frogs. You know, when I listen to them, I can hear some of the frogs chirping like birds, and some of the frogs are croaking. So there's chirping and there's croaking going on right now on top of Sleeping Giant Mountain. You know, if you want to come up here and experience this wonderful thing for yourself, you could. But you have to come to the back side of Sleeping Giant Mountain. If you go to the castle, keep going past the castle to the back side, and then you'll start hearing the peeper frogs, and then just go to where they are. What I do is I go to the other side of Sleeping Giant Mountain, and I park my car over there. It's a place called Chestnut Lane, and there's another trailhead where all the trails start from there on Chestnut Lane, and then I go up, I start off in the back of the mountain, and I just come straight up here. When I came up, I took the Orange Trail, and that's where these little peeper frogs are right here. They're right on the Orange Trail. You should come up here and listen to them for yourself. This is wonderful. I'm loving it. Let's take a little listen to what the peeper frogs sound like. Now, you know what's really funny, even funnier than listening to these peeper frogs screaming their heads off, what's really funny is when you come up here like 2 or 3 months after the peeper frogs come up, then all the little peeping dies down, except for one little peeper frog. There'll be one frog peeping his head off because he couldn't find the lover. Now, all these frogs just came up out of the ground. They all want to find a mate. They all want to have little babies. They all want to find a lover. And one by one, they'll all stop peeping. Except when you get to the end, there'll be one last frog left peeping his head off because he couldn't find a lover all year. And when you come up here 2 or 3 months, 4 months down the road, and you hear that one frog peeping, you gotta laugh. You gotta feel sorry for that one little frog. He never found a lover. So I suggest that you come up to Sleeping Giant State Park yourself and listen to the peeper frogs. And for those of And Bill O'Reilly likes to talk about something called the culture war. If you ever watch him, or maybe you've heard that term somewhere else, he says that there is a culture war going on in America right now. And as Bill O'Reilly defines it, the culture war is between the right-wing extremist conservatives and what he calls the loony leftists, the liberals, the loony liberals. Now these culture warriors, like I said, are a bunch of right-wing extremists, and they have an agenda that they want to force down the throat of America. It's this John Birch Society type right-wing extremism that's promoting the culture war in America today. And that's all I really wanted to say in this episode of Donzi's World. I hope you enjoyed it. Now, if you want to help me fight these John Birch Society culture warriors, you can email me. I welcome your support, and we'll do this together. What I do is I put up flyers in New Haven with my message on it. I make little buttons that people can have and pin on their clothing with my message on it. And of course, I make this TV show. If you'd like to help me, if you're mad about the conservatives and you want to fight them, work with me, and we'll do it together. Of course, you can't be afraid to come on TV. But I have a lot of fun doing this, and you'll have a lot of fun too if you help me out. And with that, I'll sign off, and I'll say have a happy day. Enjoy the summer. It's coming fast, and it feels wonderful. Bye-bye.
Yeah, man.
We're all just people.